It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Smooth and Savvy is joined by some of the hottest talent in the entertainment industry, from musicians to authors and all those in between. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Mr. Smooth and Savvy himself, Douglas Coleman.
Howdy ho, hey. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. Wow, did we not have much time for this intro. The interviews ran long and they are full, so I've just got like a minute. We've got two interviews today. First up is Shelby Alinsky, who is a senior editor at National Geographic in the Kids Books Department, and she manages books like the National Geographic Kids Almanac, National Geographic Kids Reader Series, and National Geographic Kids Chapter Book Series. She will be up first, followed by Tracee Sioux, who is an author, publisher, spiritual business, and life coach. Tracee's work has been featured in New York Times Magazine, Forbes.com, and Today.com, as well as many online and regional publications. She will be up second. Without further ado, straight into Shelby's interview. Okay, please welcome Shelby Alinsky. Hi, Shelby. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing very well. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. You are a senior editor at National Geographic. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
Okay. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and exactly what you do?
Sure. Well, I am the editor for Learning Literacy and STEM for National Geographic Children's Books. And that basically means that I edit and manage all of our books that are either for early readers, so our leveled reader books for kids who are just starting to learn to read on their own, or our early chapter books for kids about ages 3rd grade or so, and also a lot of our science books or books that are not quite reference books, but also give you a lot of information, like our Everything series, which is all about all kinds of different topics, everything you wanted to know about the specific topic that the book is on.
Now, National Geographic has been around for a long time. It started out as a magazine, correct?
Well, it started in 1888 as a society of explorers. So, a lot of these guys who were going out and exploring the world. And the magazine actually started as just the report of the society. So they'd write up, what they'd been doing, what new information they'd been learning. And then somewhere along the way, people started getting really interested in this more than just a report of the society. And then it morphed into the magazine and then morphed into the big media company that we know and love today.
Now, is the magazine still published?
Oh, absolutely. It's, here in-house we call it the quote-unquote big magazine. That's published, every month. There's a print version and digital version. But right now we also have Traveler magazine, which is all about different destinations. There's a history magazine. There's, of course, my department, which is the kids department. We have National Geographic Kids magazine, as well as all the books that we produce.
Because when I was a kid, I remember the magazine, but that was probably about it. And then sometime in the 70s maybe, there was a TV show, which I always liked because it was all going out into the jungle, filming animals, and was it called National Geographic Explorer, I think? Explorer,
yeah. We have a couple of channels now, National Geographic Channel and National Geographic Wild. We're actually just relaunching National Geographic Explorer as a TV show. It's got a whole new format to it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So check that out. I think this fall is when it's going to start airing again.
An editor is different than an author. So people send in material for you, and then you have to decide whether to use it or not, whether to publish it?
Yeah, I say an editor is really a 3-part job. Part 1, which is what you're talking about, is acquisitions. So if people have a proposal for a book, they can send that in to us and we'll evaluate it. each of the editors here has a different focus. We all have a different focus for our books. So, when a proposal comes in, we'll make sure it gets to the right editor. We also develop products. A lot of our books, most of our books actually, we come up with the idea for in-house, and then we go look for somebody to write the book for us. We hire a work-for-hire author. So that's one part. Part two is sort of the businessy project management side. So we're negotiating contracts and making offers to authors. We're managing the book budgets. We're managing the schedules, managing the workflow, all of that, kind of just the day-to-day of keeping these books running. And then the third part is really the sort of creative editorial part, which is when we're really digging in with the book. We're editing the text, and by editing, I mean we're working with the author to, figure out what information needs to be shared, how to share it, especially nonfiction. We're working a lot with how do you communicate this information to our readers at an appropriate reading level. It's not copy editing and proofreading. It's actually an entirely separate job, a different person who goes through and checks for the commas and checks for spelling. So, people ask me all the time if, I'm a comma whiz, and I'm not. That's our stellar proofreaders and copy editors who take care of that. And then also as the editor, you're really the champion for the vision of the book. So you're the one working with design and with the photo editors, and if there's art, working with the artists and the author to make sure that the book is really coming together the way you envision it, and it can come to life how you want it to and need it to. So it's really three very different parts that you're dealing with every day for all of your books.
Okay, how big of an organization is National Geographic these days?
Oh gosh, we're a big organization. We've got two sides to it. There's the National Geographic Society side, which is the nonprofit side. They're the ones who give grants to explorers. We induct a class of about 15 to 17 explorers every single year. We give grants. So we're really funding people who are out there on the cutting edge. So that's one side. We also do lectures. If you're here in DC, we have lectures. They also travel around the country and a lot of times around the world. So that's all part of it, as well as museum exhibits. And then we have the for-profit side, which are all the products we do. So those are all the different magazines and the different TV channels, adult books and kids books. We have experiences. Kids might be familiar with the National Geographic Bee, which is kind of like the spelling bee except for geography, and that's a national competition that goes on. So, it's a really large organization, and we're spread out. Headquarters is here in DC, but we have satellite offices in New York and LA, and we're really all over the place.
I'm curious about one thing you brought up. You had mentioned explorers. Now, these days, most of the world has been explored. How does one qualify for a grant to be an explorer with you?
Yeah, you would think that most of the world has been explored, although there's a great saying that we know more about the surface of the moon or Mars than we do about our own oceans. So the ocean is actually a really big place. It still has, the quote-unquote true exploration. But really, we look for people who are on the cutting edge of our different content pillars. And our content pillars are protecting the environment. Obviously, we're really interested in making sure that ecosystems remain intact. So we work with a lot of people who are working with rainforest conservation or with wild animal conservation of animals that are going extinct, critical species, that sort of thing, or people who are working with local people on the ground to make sure that they can live in harmony with the animals around them. That tends to be a big thing in places like Africa, where you've got lions roaming around and people building farms that are maybe encroaching on the lion's territory. And if you're a hungry lion and there's a cow just kind of sitting there, obviously that's a good choice for dinner.
Sure.
So, helping those people figure out and understand that, the lions are after their livestock, they're having less space to hunt in, and here's some easy prey. So figuring out ways for lions, or really any wild animals and humans, to live together. We work a lot with people on cutting edge of engineering and exploration. We've got a lot of engineers. We just inducted actually an architect from Taiwan who uses recycled materials, and he's found a way to use recycled plastics to change them on the molecular level to use as really beautiful building supplies. So some of his buildings are just really stunning architecturally, but they're all recycled materials. So we cover a lot. We have wildlife investigators. Of course, we have your classic. We have paleontologists and archaeologists and marine biologists and all those people who would automatically come to mind. And then, of course, we've also got the adventurers who are out there climbing mountains and just pushing themselves to the limit within the natural geography of the world. And, of course, space. Don't forget about space.
Space is we still got a long ways to go for space. So if somebody came to you, let's say, and they wanted to do some exploration of a particular part of the ocean, and assuming that you guys at National Geographic said, okay, that's great, yeah, we'd be interested in that, you would fund the expedition and presumably film it, and how does that work?
It really depends on the project and how the scientist has approached us. So we do just give straight grants. So someone will come to us and say, I want to go study sun bears. I want to, spend 5 months out in the woods studying sun bears. I'm going to do a documentary about it. And in order to do this, I need X amount of money. And so that would just be a straight grant proposal, and that would go through the review process. And if it's approved, then they would receive the grant. And in exchange, we generally want them to send us any media that gets produced from this grant. It also depends on what other partners they have and where else they've gotten grants. How the exact every explorer and every grant is different. It's a contract process. So That's one way. Then the other way we do it is more about fostering the people. So those are our young explorers who are college age. These are people generally who are either an undergrad or in the process of getting their advanced degree, who we see a lot of potential in. We really like the area that they're working in. And so we'll induct those as young explorers, and they get a grant as part of it. And they also get media training, and, we'll sort of foster them and help grow them. The next level up after that is the emerging explorer. And these are people who are on the cutting edge of their fields, who are out there already, after school. So, they're either postdocs or they're in their 20s, 30s, although age really doesn't matter. It depends more on what they're doing. And again, those we choose as people. So, we're really interested in them as people and what they're doing. And again, they get a grant as part of it, but they also get the media training. We'll often send them on lecture tours, or a TV special is appropriate. We'll do that, or a magazine article. We generally only choose a few topics that go across the whole society every year. So, a couple years ago, we had Spinosaurus, which our explorer had discovered the most complete remains of Spinosaurus. So that was cross-departmental for us. And we had a big magazine article, and we had a kids magazine article, and we had a National Geographic Nova special and a traveling exhibit, which is still traveling around the world. So, that's something that would go across. Or like exploring Mars is something that goes across. And then we have our really top tier layer, which are the explorers in residence. And these are people who have dedicated their lives to their field of research and are really just the preeminent people in their field. So Bob Ballard or Sylvia Earle are examples of our explorers in residence. So there are different there are different ways that we support our explorers and that they're part of the society, and how we work with them.
It's something that I've always been interested in doing, but I've never actually, pursued it. I think I'm more of an armchair explorer. Like, yeah. I love watching those shows. There was one that was particularly good, was Michael Palin did a series of Around the World in 80 Days, and he did Pole to Pole. They were just really good, and I just really got into this. He went from the North Pole to the South Pole, and the only rule was whenever possible, they didn't fly. They had to go by dog sled, they went by snowmobile, by boat, by car, whatever, train, any way but flying. Flying was like the last resort. And it took him about 3 or 4 months. And this whole thing was filmed. It was documented. It was really, really very interesting. But I think that's the extent of my ambition to go being an explorer. I think watching it on a big flat screen TV is about my speed.
Yeah, one thing we really believe here, and really truly believe it, is that it's great to be curious. And whether that means you are physically the one out there slogging through the mud, or whether you're reading about someone else doing it, which I personally would rather read about someone else doing it, there's so much to learn in the world. Oh, yeah. And so, our job here is to help connect the people who are out there doing these things with the people who want to know about it.
Let's talk about a couple of the books that you've got on your list here. The first one that I was curious about was Hoops to Hippos. Yeah. Tell us about that book.
Yeah, that is actually one of my favorite books I've worked on. It's part of a series of ours of chapter books. So these are books for kids who are, just becoming confident readers, so about in 3rd grade, and they're narrative stories. So they read like fiction, but they're all true stories. And a lot of the stories in the series are about, animals who are best friends or animals who've been rescued. And then a few years ago, I got a call from a sports agent who said, I'm working with this basketball player, professional basketball player. He'd really like to come in to talk to you about a book. And I said, well, okay, sure. Truthfully, I didn't expect to really do a book with him. I thought, maybe it would just be a great story. And I could say, hey, guess what? I met a professional basketball player today. And it was Boris Diaw. He plays for the San Antonio Spurs, although I think he just got traded. He's actually on the French national basketball teams. He came in and he sat down, he started talking, and he said, off the court, my big passion is wildlife photography, and I go on safari every summer and I take photos. Can I show you some? And I said, okay, sure, show me. And he started flipping through his photos, and truthfully, some of them were just stunning photos. Photos, and National Geographic is known for our photography. We don't take photography lightly. And some of them were really high quality photos. And, I thought, how interesting to get to know a whole different side of this guy. You see him out on the basketball court, and what you know about him is, his basketball, but he's really passionate about this other side and about showing people these animals and helping people connect and understand these animals in their natural environment. So we decided to do this chapter book with him and tell some of his stories out on safari, and hopefully get some of those kids who either know him from basketball and are really into basketball. Maybe they're not big readers, but maybe they'll pick up this book because they know who he is. And they'll, not only learn about a different side of him, but learn that people can have all kinds of different interests and, have fun reading in the process.
So the other one that we want to cover is called Everything Sports. Is this book somehow related to the Olympics?
Yeah, well, we certainly wanted to do it in conjunction with the Olympics, although it goes much deeper. We do talk a little bit about the Olympics, but our goal with the book is really to introduce readers to all kinds of different sports. And we mention or show over 70 sports in the book. And some of them are the ones you know about. They're your typical sports. But we also wanted to get in ones that are popular in other countries that aren't necessarily popular here in the U.S., or that, maybe you don't think about as sports. for example, I learned while working on this book that the Olympics actually considers both chess and the card game bridge sports.
Wow.
So, and just to introduce kids to all these different sports, because you never know what's going to get them out there and playing, what might spark their interest.
I find that interesting that chess is considered a sport. It doesn't take a lot of physical activity to play chess, but certainly it takes a whole lot of mental activity.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I don't think chess has ever been contested in the actual Olympics, but as it's recognized as an Olympic sport, you know, if they wanted to make a bid for it for one of the Olympic Games, they could make a bid, and if they're accepted, we could be seeing chess in one of the Olympic Games.
Well, that would be interesting. Get a gold medal for chess. The last one I wanted to ask you about is Welcome to Mars by Buzz Aldrin, who was a very famous astronaut. This is something he wrote?
Yeah, he wrote it. We paired him with a co-author, Marianne Dyson, who she herself actually was a NASA employee. She was one of the first 10 female flight controllers at NASA, and has since, in her retirement, written children's books. So we knew that, you know, she could really help Buzz take these very complex scientific ideas and communicate them to children. So they worked together to write it, but it's really all about Buzz's mission that humans need to start looking to settle on Mars. And how do we do that? And how do we get there? What does it actually take to get to Mars and to live on Mars? You know, one of my favorite parts when we were working through the book is I was talking with Marianne and Buzz, and we were saying, well, okay, you know, if there's an established colony on Mars, what kind of jobs would there be there? And, you know, we started talking about the fact that probably one of the first businesses that would open to support a community on Mars would be a restaurant, because everybody needs to eat. It's a lot more efficient to cook for large groups of people than for each person to cook in their own little pod or room or house. And also it's part of a community to have communal eating. So we thought that was really cool. And so it's, you know, it's a book that we really hope will get kids thinking about Mars, and certainly with movies like The Martian out there, it's a pretty popular topic right now. And thinking about what it would take to get to Mars and why it might be important to start looking to move to another planet.
Wow, I can just see McDonald's opening the first restaurant on Mars already.
Yeah, one interesting thing I did learn in the book is that there's an international treaty through the United Nations, I believe, that says that countries can't claim land on celestial bodies. So, you know, the U.S. couldn't go to Mars and say, you know, we claim this territory as the United States. But there's no such restriction for businesses. So if a business can get themselves to Mars, you know, McDonald's could claim territory and say, you know, we claim this spot. We're going to open a McDonald's here.
Well, Shelby, listen, we have run out of time. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was very enlightening and a lot of fun talking to you. Is there a website that we can give out where people can come and look at these books?
Yeah, National Geographic Kids books are available wherever books are sold. So check your local bookstores, also online, Amazon, Target, Walmart, or you can check out kids.nationalgeographic.com.
Kids.nationalgeographic.com. Okay, well, thank you again for coming on the show.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
In-house production and recording in Louisiana Publishing Company is now offering a special for podcasters on their CD Pro Radio network. For just $20 a month, CD Pro Radio will broadcast your podcast twice a week on their network. This is a great and inexpensive opportunity for podcasters to gain some exposure for their show without having to spend a lot of money. Please check them out at cdproradio.com. That's cdproradio.com.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto!
Wrong hat.
I take a 7.5.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Okay, please welcome my guest, Tracee Sioux. Hi, Tracee. How are you?
I am wonderful. How are you, Douglas?
Doing very well. Just for everybody's information, it's spelled Sioux, like Sioux City, Iowa, not S-U-E. In case anybody wants to look you up, I just want to make sure that they have the spelling of your name right. So, tell us a little about yourself. I've got your bio, and it looks like you've done all kinds of things, but why don't you give us a brief summary, and then we can get into your book, and you've got a radio show as well.
Well, I am a spiritual business and life coach. I have a company called Sioux Inc., and we do business coaching, marketing, and publishing books. So it pretty much takes a person and makes them into a pro. And I started this journey down a spiritual path. And I had 20 years of business journalism and business experience behind me. And so I just sort of merged those two so that I could help people do their dream, basically say yes to their soul's purpose and then turn it into a profitable business.
You have a spiritual business. Now, the first thing that comes to my mind is people who use astrologists and psychics to predict when they should make major decisions regarding their life and their business. Is that kind of what you do?
So I'm not a psychic. I have some healers as clients. So some energy healers are my clients. And so basically I have two kinds of clients. One is a healer, a spiritual person who has some sort of spiritual gift that they're trying to use, and they don't know anything about business. So with them, I focus more on business models and what they need to do to sell it, how to brand it, design it, publish with it, create books and content. So my super spiritual people, they already sort of have the spiritual foundation, but they don't know anything about business, and they make terrible entrepreneurs because they're all about the healing, right? All about the love. The other type of client I tend to get is a person who is really great at business. They have an established business, or they have a lot of experience with that. They're great on the business models, but it's not helping their lifestyle, and it's making them crazy. So maybe they're working 80 hours a week, weekends, evenings. Maybe their family life isn't coming in as a priority. Maybe they haven't heard their soul in forever. And so what I do with them is more spiritual. So some meditation, some visualization, some helping them tune into the inner voice that will allow them some freedom, because often these people are caught up in climbing the ladder or the treadmill, and they're just rushing as fast as they can. So what I help them do is put some boundaries around their business, make some lifestyle choices, get more grounded and enjoy their lives more. And then they become more productive and make more money.
Okay, one of your books is called Soul versus Ego Smackdown, which I saw on your website, and I was really curious about that one. Before we get to that whole process, though, I want to see if you can define for me what your soul exactly is, because a lot of people don't have a great answer for that, particularly religious people. Mm-hmm. They always talk about their soul, but they never really give a definition of what exactly it is. So I'm going to ask you that question and see if what is your idea of what a soul is?
So my idea of a soul is that it is the eternal part of you that is God. And it is wiser than your physical self. And it is expansive, ever expanding, and it wants your joy. It wants you to be happy. And the soul often comes to earth for a purpose or a reason, or has a gift that they want to share. And if we ignore the voice of the soul, which in some religions is called the still small voice, if we ignore that little voice, some people call it the conscience, then we are discontent. No matter what we're doing, how much we're achieving, what kind of car, picket fence, kids, it doesn't matter. Because we're discontent because we're not doing that thing that's pulling us towards it. And our soul is the thing that's pulling us towards it. Our soul is the one going, gosh, I want to write that book, or geez, I want to be a teacher. So it's the eternal part of you that is God.
Okay.
God as in consciousness, or God as in spirit, or, whatever your belief about what God is, this is the part of you that is that.
And this is the part that some people believe once you die, that your soul doesn't die. You simply go
Right.
on to something else.
Yeah, it's eternal.
Right.
It existed before, it exists after.
Would you consider that your life force, your life energy?
Mm-hmm.
People
Yeah,
call it
I
that.
would.
One of the things that was on here, one of your bullet points, was how do you know it's your soul and not your ego? Now, let me back up just to something you said. You said that the soul is the one that's telling you, you should write that book, you should be a teacher, you should, people in the creative endeavors are often at battle between their soul and I don't know if it's their ego or if it's just, well, I have to go to work as a waiter to make money to eat, but my real passion is music, but I can't afford to be a musician.
Right. Yeah. So
that's kind of the battle. Yeah.
Well, so we just described the soul. Now let me describe the ego for you.
Okay.
The ego is the primordial piece of your brain that existed when we lived in caves and in very, very, very tiny tribes and groups of people, right? So the ego wanted to keep you safe, wanted to keep the tribe safe. So it did not want you to venture out of the cave unless it absolutely had to forage or eat, kill something to eat. It didn't like interacting with other people. The ego hates risk. It loves same because the ego confuses same with safe. So the ego has a function. It's to keep you safe, but it's not a 2016 function where we have our basic elements covered, right? We have our housing and clothing and we drive cars now and we interact more with a much broader scale of people, especially since the internet. But the ego hasn't quite caught up to that. And so it's always telling you, you can't do that. And the three main things that I see it used in the Western world are you don't have enough money, you don't have enough time, and you're not good enough. You don't have the qualifications. And you can get stuck in one or a combination of those three for your whole entire life unless you recognize, okay, well, this isn't actually true. I'm not actually going to die if I write this book. This isn't actually true. I'm not going to die if the book isn't a bestseller. This isn't actually true. I actually can go and get a teaching certificate, right? I don't have to be a waiter. There are other ways to make money with my art. So those are the differences. Your soul wants you to be happy and your ego wants you to stay the same, regardless of how horrible same is. And so you really get to choose. You get to choose. Do I listen to the soul and take what feels like bigger risks? Or do I listen to the ego and stay in same even if it's terrible?
Okay, well, that's interesting because I've never thought of ego in that vein before. I always thought my definition of ego was, on one sense, yes, it's the defense mechanism. That part I got. But it was also the part that was connected to vanity and that was connected to arrogance, which I don't know how that relates to defense mechanism.
Okay, so I would say that vanity and that sort of, we say, oh, he's got a huge ego, right? He thinks so much of himself. So I would say that person that quality is one of the ego's strategies. Okay, so it's not the ego, it's one of the ego strategies. So I run into people all the time who will be like, well, I want this gigantic online training company and I want to write 5,000 books and I want to make $1 billion and I want to be CEO of this giant corporation, but they don't want to do step one because that's beneath them. So they don't want to build a small website and start there. They don't want to practice creating content and suck at it at the beginning. So basically, they have this inflated idea of what they should be, but they're unwilling to do what it takes to get there. They just want to be instantly there. And the people who follow their soul are like, okay, well, I want to write a book. Guess what? I'm going to have to open the computer and start writing a book, right? And then I'm going to have to do all the work to finish the book and edit the book and publish the book and format the book, right? So people who are listening to their soul don't mind starting at step 1 because the whole entire process is what they're after, right? It's the joy of writing the book, the pleasure of reaching creative flow, the joy of expression, right? But the person who's got this gigantic vision that doesn't want to open the page and start, or who expects to be, president of the United States without becoming a congressman or whatever, right? That is an inflated ego, but it's a symptom of ego. It isn't the ego.
Okay, well, why would the ego do that to you?
Well, to keep you safe, right? Because if you have this gigantic vision that's unachievable without step 1, how are you ever going to get there? The ego knows that you're not going to get there. You can't get there because you won't do step 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 or 30, right? The ego knows that if it says, okay, we're just going to jump to step 2000, but we're not going to do step 1, you're stuck. You can't do anything. You're just stuck.
So basically, that is a strategy of the ego to convince you not to take the risk to go with the soul.
Yes.
I guess if the guy is stuck in the mirror looking at himself all day, he's not going to do anything else.
No.
And okay. All right. I get that. Yeah, that makes sense.
He might ruin his relationships with that when the girl's like, dude, I'm over here, okay. So that keeps him uncommitted, right?
Right.
Like ego does not want to take the risk of love. And so he just becomes extremely self-absorbed and afraid of commitment. Okay. So now he's just robbed himself of love.
Well, commitment is certainly scary, in the sense that if you've never done it, it requires a kind of a retooling of your whole way of thinking. They call it commitment on purpose. And it's the same word that is used for work, isn't it? Well, I'm committed to this job now. And when you get into a relationship with somebody, a serious relationship, commitment really is the right word. Love is great, but it doesn't really define what's going to happen once you get together. There's a lot more to it. Love won't keep it going unless there's commitment as well.
Well, okay, these are valid points. We do have a love issue in the world, but if your soul wants that, maybe your soul wants it for various reasons. Maybe it wants this feeling of connection or the push and pull between you and another person, the growth, the learning, the stick-to-itiveness of commitment. Because you're right, like I'm committed to writing. It does not mean that I have never wanted to divorce writing, but I have continued to do it because of my commitment and because the joy outweighs the struggle, right? So if your soul's calling you towards a relationship, your ego is doing strategies to keep you from it. So some strategies might be, well, I'm not going to settle. I hear this from, women all the time in their 40s who they say they want children, but they don't want to settle for whatever man, which basically means I'm not going to do this with anyone because everyone has something, right? You're always settling. But what this person who has stayed single settled for is being alone, right? Because it's way easier to be alone. You get to do anything you want. There's no compromise. Another way would be, I'm not going to do online dating. Right? Or I'm not going to do, get out there and meet people. Well, it's really hard to date if you're, working from home and you go to the same grocery store and you won't get online or go out to some social events to meet people. I'm just so introverted. Okay. All of that, it's ego using your fear to keep you from getting what your soul wants, because love is a ginormous risk. It's a huge risk. It's terrifying. It's scary. It takes a lot of throwing yourself off a cliff and hoping that you fly and hoping that this other person comes through. That's one of the reasons that love is so scary, is because you really have to depend on the other person to do their part.
Right.
And sometimes they don't. And then that can be quite devastating. But your soul craves the connection. It craves the intimacy. The choice really is yours. You could just decide that you don't want that. And so you're going to go with the ego. But then you rob yourself of what your soul really wants, which creates a perpetual discontent.
Do you think everyone's soul wants love or needs love?
No, I don't. Well, yes. I think everyone's soul wants love, but not necessarily a committed relationship.
How do you get love without a committed relationship?
Well, you might seek love from, say, a church or God or friendship or, community bonding on a team or in an organization. Children, dogs. A lot of people get love from dogs, from their animals.
True. Yeah.
Everyone's seeking love of some nature, but not everyone wants to or needs to seek it in a committed relationship. And certainly not all the time. It might make sense to, take a break, to, take some time for yourself to figure some stuff out for you.
What is that?
That is my child.
Oh.
Who's about to get in big trouble. That's what that is.
You said...
Zach,
I thought it was a dog.
On a call. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm debating whether I should leave that in or not. That was kind of funny.
You can, because it's hilarious.
Yeah. Actually, I thought it was a dog.
No. That was my child goofing off.
Is it he or she?
It's a he, and he's 10, and I just made him and his friend go out with baking soda and steel brushes to try to scrub off the orange spray paint. I knew it wouldn't work, but I thought I should make them work for it before I go get the acetone.
Oh, what did they spray paint orange?
Stars. Zach said he was teaching John how to make stars.
With spray paint?
Spray paint, orange spray paint on the driveway.
Oh, on the driveway. Oh, great.
On the driveway, yeah.
Oh, that's fabulous. The other book that you wrote that I wanted to ask you about. This says you've written 13 books. Is that right? So
I have, yeah.
You have been busy. Okay.
Yeah.
What kind of time frame was that? How many days did it take?
That's my entire career.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't days. Like not one book a day. Huh?
Well, I wrote Soul versus Ego Smackdown in 2 days.
Wow. Well, that's pretty
It just
impressive.
flowed through me. It just came over me, and I just typed as fast as I could type.
The other book is called The Year of the Yes, or The Year of Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, The Year of Yes.
What is that one about?
So in 2013, I had just gotten a divorce, and I was in a pretty devastating financial situation. I had 2 kids. I was suddenly the sole provider of my household. And I was stressed. I was freaking out. We were eating from the food bank, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. I had always worked, but I was the primary parent, and so my career had taken the much lower rung than his had, and I was not making anywhere near enough money to survive. I was making about $600 a month on piece writing work, some freelance articles and blogs and that sort of thing. But one day I was doing dishes, and I was looking at the peace lily in front of my sink, and I suddenly realized that the voice inside my head had gone silent. And the voice inside my head had been saying, I want a divorce, I want a divorce, I want a divorce, I want a divorce, repeatedly over the last several years. And it suddenly was silent, and I had this profound peace because my soul had finally gotten what she wanted. And so I thought to myself, well, if my soul's going to get what she wants anyway, where would I be if I said yes to everything she told me to do, no matter what? What would my life look like? What would I be doing with my days? What would I be doing with my life? And I decided that that was a worthy experiment because I had nothing left to lose. So I committed from January to December in 2013 to say yes to everything my soul told me to do, to really tune in and listen, and then just do it without questioning, without demanding to know the outcome, without some good reason or justification. And it was quite a ride.
How do you define for somebody who can't tell the difference? Like they don't know what their soul's telling them. How do you get them in touch with that? Yeah,
getting quiet and filtering out information is a really important thing. So I use this meditation. It's a writing meditation called Soul versus Ego Smackdown, just like the book. And in the meditation, the first thing we do is silence the outside voices, right? We are inundated with information and noise and voices from all sorts of angles and sources, and they all have an agenda for your life. So first you want to silence those. So turn off the TV. Don't watch the news. Stop checking Facebook all the time. Turn the radio off in your car. Stop listening to your, friend who's just sucking up your energy while she complains about her life, right? So these are all voices that are distracting us, and we're paying attention to them because that's a great way for our ego to do it, is just distract us, right? And once we filter out some of those voices, we can start to tune in to our own self and listen to our soul. So you could do some things like meditation, but my soul talks to me most often during kickboxing or some other kind of exercise. And this is because my ego is satisfied from kicking a bag, and my brain and body are working so hard that they, sort of shut up the background chatter. And then my soul has some space to, speak and be like, oh, here's a good idea. Oh, here's a good idea. Christianity calls it the still small voice, because you have to be still to hear it. And it is a small voice. It is not going to be louder than all this noise that we've just inundated ourselves with, right? We just are constantly inundated with noise. And so you have to create a space for your soul to even be able to speak. So maybe you take a vacation alone, or you take some sort of workshop or spiritual experience, or you hire someone and you work on meditation or yoga or whatever works for you. I know a lot of people run for this reason. It clears their mind so they can hear their inner voice speak. Exercise is a great way to do it. Drive the car without your radio is a great way to do it. And then once you start hearing two voices, and you can sort of go, okay, this voice is saying this and this voice is saying that. So maybe you've got an angel and a devil, right, on each shoulder. That's one of the images that we use for this inner conflict. The soul will never call you names. It is always loving and kind. It always believes that you can do it. And it is never mean, right? The ego can be extremely cruel. It often calls people names. It's often hysterical and angry, like, we can't do this, we'll die. It's often just over the top extreme. And it's often mean, right? And it thinks that it has legit points. But maybe it does, right? I mean, most of the things I've done in my life, if you looked at my bank account, you would say, well, you can't afford that. But somehow I did them anyway, right? Because that's what my soul wanted to do. And so she assisted me in finding the resources, finding the money, finding the time that I need to do the things that I want to do. So those are some clues how you can figure it out. One is kind, loving, one is mean. The ego wants to keep you insane, but the soul wants to make you happy and experience joy, right? So if you're looking at two options and one of them is same and one of them you think might make you happy, well, there's a clue.
Do you think that I guess the ego is much louder than the soul? Yeah.
Well, the ego is louder than the soul until you get practice and you train it. I don't believe that you can dissolve the ego as, some monks spend their whole lives trying to do. I have other things to do. I can't just sit there and try to dissolve the ego. I've got kids and a business and a life to run. So I think that you can create space for the ego where it's allowed to live, acknowledge what it has to say, and then choose something different and just sort of do some calming things for the ego, right? So structure is one of the things that calm the ego, right? If you do something new, you want to do it at the same time every day until it becomes the normal. As soon as it's the normal and the same, your ego is fine. So you want to create experiences and structure in your life that calm the ego so that you can do these other things. Otherwise, you'll just be a conflicted mess.
Do you think that there are people out there that have no soul?
That's an interesting question. I
mean, it's kind of a cliche, when somebody is in an argument with somebody and saying, you have no soul.
I don't want to officially answer that question because I don't know the official answer to that question, but I do know that there are some people who allow their egos to get so out of check that they have no contact with their soul, that they have no experience of their soul, and therefore it does not mitigate their behavior or their compassion or their empathy. Certainly I have met certain people that I'm like, this is bad news, this is bad energy, and I'm out. Right. I'm not going to deal with them because they're, sociopathic or whatever, and psychopathic, which, is probably a spiritual disease on some level. Right. Like just a letting your ego get to the point where it does not care about other human beings or animals, or it starts to get excited by pain or whatever. Like that's not cool. So I do think that people need to protect themselves from certain energies. I know that there are energy vampires in the world, and probably everyone on the planet has one in their life somewhere. So this person might just be feeding on your positive energy. You're doing all this work to listen to your soul, and this person calls you up on the phone, talks to you for an hour, sucks up your energy, and hangs up, right? And you're like, what just happened to me? So if you feel drained by another person, it's not necessarily that they have no soul. It's just that they're not feeding their soul. They're feeding they're feeding off of you. And that's actually very, very, very common in the world. But as far as people who have no soul, I would stay far, far away from them.
I think that phrase that you just used, energy vampire, is really a good phrase, because I know everybody has had that kind of a person in their life. Different terminologies, a leech, emotionally needy. And yeah, you're right. Those people are so tiresome. They are just draining. You know where I find a lot of those people now because of the internet is on Facebook. You get these people who just relentlessly message you, on and on and on. And it's always about some ridiculous thing. I mean, with artists, okay, I have a radio show, so I expect to get submissions. That's fine. But I have a few that just continuously, like they're writing a song every 15 minutes, it seems like. And, they're just constantly, well, what can you check out this one? How about this one? Here, what'd you think of that one? And they're just like throwing stuff at you and just expect you to drop whatever it is you're doing and read their book or listen to their song or something like that. And it's just, oh my God, The nice thing about social media is you can turn it off.
You can. And you know what? I highly recommend filtering. So you can remain friends with someone and hide their messages so they're not coming through your newsfeed. And I actually do this quite a bit because I don't want to look at my own Facebook newsfeed, which is sort of my own social media universe, and see ranting and chronic complaining and moaning and, desperate pleas for attention. Yeah. I just don't want to see it. I don't want to see the politics. I just don't want to see it because that messes up my own internal guidance system and my own anxiety levels and my own, blood pressure. So, it's all about boundaries. Like you can or can't do that to me. So let's say you have a friend who's like constantly sucking off of you. Stop giving them what they want and they'll disappear and go find someone else to feed off of. Right. Like, just ask those people, say, I'm not interested, pursue something else. It's all about boundaries. And sometimes some of us aren't very good at creating boundaries, especially if we are empathetic and compassionate human beings. But if you sense that someone is leeching off your energy, cut that off. Just stop giving it to them. Like whatever it is that they're feeding off of, whatever it is they're wanting, whether that's sympathy or attention or whatever it is, when you stop feeding them, they move on and find someone else to feed on.
Well, it's very true. And I mean, it's gotten to the point where I've unfriended a few people. It's nice that there is that function on Facebook. It's not nice that you have to resort to that. Because that's essentially, hanging up the phone and taking it off the hook for that person,
Yeah. I mean, I've had to block a few people myself and I don't really feel bad about it.
Well, there's so many. I mean, the thing is we've become a little bit impersonal as a society because of Facebook and Twitter and things. We don't have to deal with people face to face anymore. We can have 1,000 conversations online and never leave your chair.
Yeah, but that's kind of an empty, soulless life, right? Our soul really loves to commune with other souls. And, I have to make myself sometimes go be social, but then I always get something out of it. I'm always happier. There are certain habits that make you happier, and getting out and interacting with people in whatever way you find pleasurable is one of those things that just make you happier.
I would partially agree with you. I am not a person that likes to go to parties and socialize with people directly. I'm definitely a performer in the sense that
you like to go out with someone, right? It may not be a large group of people, but you do get social needs met, whether you go out for a beer with a buddy or you play on a softball team. You said you're a performer. That's a pretty social experience, especially if you're performing live, right?
It's yes and no again, because I am not good on a one-to-one situation with people at parties and things like that. But I can go out on stage and sing or perform in front of thousands of people and be absolutely comfortable. It's hard to explain, but people who are in the performing arts kind of understand this. It's like you're somebody else, okay? And to go out there and be a character, like an actor or the musician, there's a wall there. You're not really you. You're this object that people are watching. Right. I'm fine with that. That's really cool. I love that, okay? But if I have to go to the supermarket and somebody bumps into me and said, "Oh, I remember you from I'm terrified. I really just curl up in my shell. I know it sounds psycho, but it's true. So my point...
It doesn't sound psycho.
Okay. So my point about social media was that social media kind of allows someone like me to be social, yet I can turn it off when I want to. It's difficult to do that when you're face to face with somebody.
Right.
You can't, especially like in an office situation, you can't say, "Okay, well, I'm done talking to you for the rest of the day." You can't say something like that and not offend somebody. But on Facebook, It's real easy to do. You say, "Well, I'm going," and you switch it off, and that's it. It's done. So that's true. I like that feature of social media.
I do too.
Yeah, where you can.
But one of the things that my ego uses on me and a lot of other introverts is we don't like being in public. We don't like talking to people. We don't like going out. We don't like it, right? So that could be a way for your ego to keep you away from relationships, away from friendships, away from risk, right? That involve other people and other conversations. Cause practically every winter I hibernate like a bear and rarely leave the house. And I have anxiety when I make myself do it, right? I belong to a book club that's totally full of introverted people, and we leave the house once a month to meet, and then we revert back to the social media. You gotta have something.
Well, that's true. That's why I like social media, because it is sort of a compromise. If I wouldn't be locked up in the house all alone for months and months and months. That would drive me nuts. Even with a dog, it's still, you need people. Okay.
You do. You need people.
But I like them in regulated time frames.
Fair. Totally fair.
All right. Let me ask you about your radio show, and then we've got to cut this interview off. Your show is called Year of Yes. Is that the name of the show?
Yep. Year of Yes Radio.
Year of Yes Radio. Okay. Tell us a little about your show. I assume it kind of follows your book.
Yeah. It kind of follows just the whole idea that you should be following your soul's purpose and your soul's passion and be able to manifest that into the real world from vision to matter. I sometimes interview people who have written books. I sometimes interview people that I meet that I'm like, oh, this person has a really interesting story to tell. And sometimes I just teach on whatever topic is interesting to me at the moment. So yeah, that's on truetoyouradio.com, and the 2 is the number 2. And it's really fun.
Tracee, thank you so much for coming on the show. We have run out of time. Your website is traceesioux.com, spelled TraceeSioux.com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me, Douglas. I
you're
really
welcome.
had a good time.
Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my special guests, Shelby Alinsky and Tracee Sioux. This is Douglas Coleman saying goodbye.
To the mile, you've got to run, not walk. To give us